What do you think?
Did you actually make that? Or did you buy that?
If you've been watching my channel, you know that I recently got a Brazilian rainbow boa, and I need to build her a new cage, so we're gonna do that right now. In a past video, I mentioned that I was gonna be using some materials that I found at a farm to build the next cage. So in particular, what I found were these windows. I found 8 windows. They're all 36 inches tall by 21 inches wide. Definitely not going to be using all 8, but I just grabbed extra just in case. So these windows were in a little bit of rough shape when I first found them. They were kind of covered in some dirt and some dust, but I've cleaned them up. They still do need a little bit of a cleaning before we start using them for the project. But before we do that, I want to run through the plan. So currently this is kind of the rough brainstorm that I've done with the materials that I have. So I have a panel of glass on the top, the back, and the bottom that I'm just leaving as the exact shape of the size of the glass itself. So that's a 36 inches by 21. So this cage will be 3 feet long by 21 inches high by 21 inches wide. That gives roughly 5 1/4 square foot of space, which kind of falls within the parameters of giving the rainbow boa roughly between 4 and 6 square feet of space. I think it might be a little bit small for her in the future, but she's only 2 right now, so she'll be fine in it for the next couple of years. Although I did talk to a few breeders and they said that would be fine for an adult enclosure, so we'll see how big she grows, and if I feel like she needs to be upgraded, I of course will do that. So that's kind of the main frame of the cage. And then right here, I believe I'm going to do a drop down acrylic door. I'm not going to do sliding glass doors this time just because of the humidity. I'm just going to lose too much humidity there. Of course, with the rainbow boa, humidity needs to be much higher. So this will be a drop down acrylic door that when it's going to sit right inside this frame. This frame I think is going to be wood. It may be wood or acrylic. I still have to figure that out. But that way the acrylic can seal, and I'll drill some holes in it for some ventilation. But of course we want minimal ventilation with the rainbow boa just to keep the humidity in. And then heat tape is most likely going to just do all of the heat, and then I might insulate the entire thing just to retain some of the heat. But for now, that's what we're working with. So the first thing I really need to do is cut the glass for the side. So I'm just using just a cheap glass cutter. This is just from Home Depot. It's like $5, and I dip it in 3-in-1 oil just so it slides a little bit easier on the glass. And I'm using the other piece of glass as my guide. This is the size I want. Just drag it right across, and you should kind of hear it etch into it. Just like that. So now that the glass has been etched, you can just apply a little bit of pressure, and it'll just snap off just like that. Okay, so I'm all set up here. We're gonna see how this goes. This process is not that, it's basically the same as building a glass aquarium. There's gonna be just some slight differences because obviously the opening for the terrarium is in the front rather than in the opening in a fish tank is at the top. So the actual placement of the glass is going to be a little bit different. Like if this were a fish tank and this were the bottom, all the glass plate would be placed directly on top. I'm not going to do it that way because I want, this is the actual going to be the back panel, so I want this to have some support. So the panels are going to be placed on top of it this way, and hopefully that works out. I have this painter's tape here. The painter's tape is going to help as we move along. As I silicone, I can flip the painter's tape up just to keep the glass supported as we go along, and then I have a square ready so we can make sure we're squaring off as we go, and hopefully this goes according to plan. I also wear these gloves. These are gardening gloves from Costco. They're great. They give you a lot of grip when you're working with the glass. Your fingers won't slip. And of course, there's no way I could show you guys this part of the build without thanking Joey over at King of DIY YouTube channel. His video is what showed me how to do this. I've never done this before, and I followed his instructions. If you are interested in a more in-depth way to do this, please go watch his stuff. His how to build a glass aquarium goes into way more detail. I'm just going to run through this really quick. He's got an amazing channel, so definitely go check him out, and this is sort of my shout out to him, and thanks a lot for all his help. So the final step here of the general assembly is just to add a bead of silicone around all the inside seams of the enclosure, just to create a little more structure and to seal it off a little bit better. So I let the silicone sit for a couple of days. It's about 2 days later, and now it's completely cured, so everything is nice and secure. And I went around and kind of used a razor blade to clip off any of the extra silicone that was kind of squeezing out the seams, and then I just really cleaned off the glass as best I could. So now that we kind of have the basic shape, of course this is not set up in the right orientation. This is supposed to be the front, it's facing up. I just have to move it. So we just want to quickly run down a few of the negatives of a glass tank. So obviously the positives for me were that I had the glass, and that was a cheaper way of going than going out and buying a new enclosure. And I enjoy building, so I wanted to do another project. But some of the negatives with a glass tank are, one, I pulled this little pros and cons list off of this video just to save some time. So if you are interested in learning the pros and cons of a glass tank, make sure you visit my website in the link below, and I go into more detail there. So right now we're going to start painting. So to paint out the sides and the back of this enclosure, I'm just going to use kind of a basic foam roller and regular kind of black acrylic paint. So nothing special about this. This is just regular black acrylic paint, and I'm obviously going to be painting the outside of the enclosure, not the inside. And this is just to keep some of the light out. All right, so let's get to painting. So to actually do the painting here, it's going to be pretty simple. So I think I could probably get away with one coat. If I have to do 2 coats, that's fine. I'm basically going to go paint on horizontally like this, and then I'm going to go right over again vertically just to cover. A foam roller is really the best because you're not going to get any brush marks or any even mini rollers that aren't foam will still leave marks. So the foam roller is really the best. And again, it's just acrylic paint, so it's non-toxic when it's completely dry. Plus it is on the outside of the enclosure, so it's not a big deal. So we're going to get to doing this right now. Alright, so I finished doing just one side of the tank, painting it. So that acrylic paint that I had showed you guys earlier, I ended up going basically through the entire tube of it just to do this. This is going to be the bottom. So I'm really happy with the way it looks. I don't know how well you can see it, but maybe I'll just spin it around here. It did a pretty good job of blacking out the side, so it's really tough to see. Maybe there's a lot of glare, but anyway, it looks pretty good. So I'm going to finish off the rest of it, although I ended up getting a different type of paint. I'm finishing the rest with just an interior and exterior latex paint. I'm just hoping that it covers a little bit easier and I don't have to do as many coats. So let's get to it. So I'm just waiting for the paint to dry between coats, painting on the outside of the walls here. So I'm going to move on to a few other things. The first thing is I have to add, now you're going to see if you use your imagination for a second, when you're staring at the enclosure from the front. So the front right now is a big open gap, there's no glass on it or anything. That's going to be lined with a wooden frame. So this is going to be on the bottom, this is going to prevent substrate from falling out. And then I'm going to also have a wooden frame coming up and around. And what that's going to do is it's going to be a place for the acrylic door that's going to fall open forward to sit on, to rest on, as well as lock against. I want to paint this black. I don't want it to look like neutral wood, so I'm just going to use the same paint that I'm using for the same latex paint that I'm using for the actual enclosure. I'm just going to paint it black, and then I'll just be sealing it with a polyurethane, probably a few coats. So my piece of oak is dry. I did about 3 coats of paint on this, so I think it looks pretty good. It's just a nice deep black color. So like I said, I'm going to be sealing it with just a polyurethane. So I'm probably going to do 3 coats. It says you only need 2 coats, but I'll probably do 3 just to make sure everything is sealed up. So I'm just about to leave for the day, so I'm going to quickly do that, and then I can let it dry, and then I'll do another coat when I get home, and one more tomorrow. You do not shake polyurethane, because you'll put bubbles in it. You don't want bubbles because they'll end up on your wood and they don't go away. You have to sand them out. So just pop this guy open. Just gonna give it a good stir. Now we just brush it on. So you probably can't tell, but my living room, kitchen, dining room area is an absolute disaster right now. I've been living in squalor for the past few days trying to get this project done. I've only had a few hours a day or an hour or so a day to work on it, and sometimes less, so I've been sort of having to piecemeal it together. And this video, I'm just taking little clips at a time, so hopefully this is all going to come together and it's going to make sense in the end. But today my goal is to try to get the door on. Or at least assemble the door and the acrylic door as well as the hinges. But I want to show you guys something that I had done earlier this morning. So I had some scrap acrylic as well as a scrap piece of oak from the runner board across the bottom. And I've never worked with acrylic before, and I really wanted to understand these materials before I did it. So I made a little test door. So this is just like a little example of kind of how my door is going to function. This way I could practice, for one, drilling into acrylic. I really only have one shot at this. So I don't have one shot. I can go buy more materials, but I don't want to buy another panel of acrylic because it's pretty expensive. It's like $70 a sheet or something like that. So I'd rather not destroy it on my first shot. And I also wanted to see how well the hinge would work to make sure that it was going to function properly. So I'll let you guys kind of take a look at that. So what I'm using are just these regular 3-inch door hinges. This is the runner board on the bottom is the slab of oak, and then I just drilled holes through the acrylic, which I'll show you guys when I actually do it. And I changed, instead of the hinges that I bought, they come with screws. I wasn't going to use screws with the acrylic sheet just because then I would have little spiky things coming out the back. So all I did is buy bolts to replace those screws with, and then I'm just going to use some acorn nuts on the back, just to make sure it's safe for the animal. But as you can see, it functions well, and I'm gonna have to do something with these screws because they do poke out the back. So maybe I'll throw some silicone over it or snip them with some side cutters. But yeah, I think I'm ready to actually tackle the real door now. Yes, that is black paint on my beige carpet. That's a great surprise for my girlfriend when she gets home. I am praying I can clean that up. This is the oak runner board that's going to be running across the bottom. You can see that it's a little bit shiny now because I've sealed it off with polyurethane. I think it's going to look really good against the black glass inside the terrarium. So I'm actually going to install the hinges directly to it right now before installing the board in. So I'm going to measure this off and space these out evenly so they look good. So now that my hinges are on the oak, I can kind of dry fit the door. So the acrylic sheet has already been cut. I was able to just cut that with an X-Acto knife, very similar to the way you cut glass, just you have to score it quite a bit more times than glass. So that wasn't too bad. It was a little bit forgiving. You can kind of sand down the edges as well. But anyway, so now I'm going to drill the holes into the acrylic for the bolts to attach the hinge to, obviously. So the way I did this in my test run is the way I'm going to do it now. So what I've done is taken a dry erase marker and drawn a dot over each hole. So when you're drilling acrylic, you need to go very slow and steady. So you need to start with basically your smallest bit that you have and then work your way up. Don't skip a bit. So if you have a set of drill bits, go through each one as you get until you get to the size you need. Acrylic will just instantly crack if you stress it too much. So you have to start very small. It takes a long time. So I have 9 drill bits to get to this size of hole. That might be extreme, but I just really don't want to risk it. Like I said, I only have the 1 sheet. So other than that, it's a very straightforward drill. So there's my 3 tiny holes, and we just go up from there. So here's the door, the hinges are on. I'm really happy with the way it's turned out. It's hard to see, you guys will be able to see better when it's on, but that's how she works, it's good. One thing I had to do was I had to add these little wooden spacers by the hinges, just because it wasn't sitting, the acrylic wasn't sitting flush against the hinge. I have to go buy longer bolts now because they're hardly screwed on, but I'll show you what I mean. I just had to make a little spacer. It's the same thickness as the acrylic, just as a spacer, so it the door wasn't really sitting properly, if that makes sense. So I painstakingly had to cut these out by hand and sand them down and they're still not quite the shape. I'm just going to paint them black so they kind of hide they're not in there, and then I do have to buy some longer bolts because these aren't quite long enough. But that's just a little quick update. So if you were having trouble picturing kind of where I was headed with this enclosure, this might make it a little more obvious. So this is the runner. We have already attached the hinges on to this guy here, and the next step is fastening this piece to the actual glass enclosure. So I'm using the product No More Nails. Focus that. So No More Nails by LePage. It seems to work on most surfaces. I know it holds wood together very nicely, and I'm thinking that it should do a decent job with this as well. I did a test one the other day with a small chunk of wood on some glass, and it held pretty good. It took a lot of pressure for me to be able to snap that off, and I had a lot of leverage. So I'm thinking this should be perfectly fine. It's not going to be being exposed to too much pressure or too much force anywhere. But then I'm also going to run a bead of silicone on the inside as well for extra support. So the first thing I want to do, I'm going to rough up this bottom edge. So I'm going to take some 60 grit sandpaper and just really add some more surface area to this bottom piece, because you don't want to be gluing two smooth pieces together. You certainly want one to be rough. So first I'm going to do that, and then we'll lay the glue down, and then we'll clamp it to the enclosure. I'm going to wipe the dust off, and now I'll apply a thick bead of the No More Nails. We're going to give this 24 hours to dry, and then we'll see how it's holding tomorrow. So I've given this bottom piece a few hours to dry, and it's in there pretty well. I ran a bead of silicone on the inside as well. I think I still might throw a little more silicone on just to give it a little more security, just to make sure it's not going to move anywhere. But this is definitely dry enough where I can start adding the other pieces of the frame. So I don't know if I had shown this yet in the video. I can't remember. I've been filming this over a few days, so I can't remember what I've shown. But I also have these so this is just a 2x1 oak as well. I'm going to have that running on the top as well as the sides. So that's going to be something for the door to sit against and lock against as well. So the door doesn't have to. You'll notice when I put the door on that I didn't do a great job of cutting. So the door isn't perfectly flush, but it's going to be sitting up against that frame, so it shouldn't be a problem. So the process of hanging these guys up is just going to be the exact same as this one's. So I'm finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel here. There's one more kind of major thing to finish, and then a few smaller details. So as you can see, the wooden frame is secured in, so I let this dry overnight, and I've also added silicone to the back to completely seal it. This is really, really solid. I have no worries about this ever coming loose. I also painted the top perimeter around the top. I wanted to leave the top clear so you could kind of view it from the top, but I also wanted to hide the silicone and the glue that you could see through the glass from the panels connecting. So this black border did a nice job of that. As you can see, the door is on and fits nicely right here, nice and snug, which is great. So there's one kind of last major thing to do is I need to attach locks to both the corners of the enclosure. So I'm going to be using just regular cabinet locks, so just cam locks, and they're going to go in the top right corner, and then they're going to clamp behind those wooden panels. That's why those wooden border is there. The next piece now is to drill these holes and get the locks installed. I need to drill a 3/4 inch hole for these cam locks, which I do not have a bit that large, so I have to get a little bit creative here. But the hole starts the same, tiny bit all the way up to a larger bit, and then once I get up to my largest bit, I just kind of have to work around the hole a bunch and use some sandpaper to slowly get the hole to being large enough. So once the holes were drilled, I was able to use this product plastics to polish the acrylic door, and then I can move on to the final steps. So I'm going to wrap up the video for right now. If you like the way the enclosure turned out, please give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below what you think. Just as a reminder, I have no professional skills, and this is just me making a plan and sticking to it. So everybody here that's watching is capable of doing something like this. This is not beyond your skill level. I've never done most of the things that I did in this video, so if you're thinking this is beyond your skill set, it's definitely not. I did this entire project in the living room of my apartment. I have very few tools, so everybody is capable of this. You just gotta have a detailed plan and stick to it. So of course what you guys really want to see is the animal in the enclosure. I am obviously going to do a video about that as well. I just didn't want to make this video super long. So please subscribe if you haven't already. If you're interested in watching me set the cage up, I'm going to add the heat to the enclosure as well as the decor, and then the next video will be releasing the Brazilian rainbow boa into the enclosure. In the meantime, if you are interested in seeing some pictures of my Brazilian rainbow boa, check out the link below, and I did post some pictures within the article for this build. And of course, thank you so much for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you next time.